I'm Joel Slattis. Who doesn't remember being a kid and zooming around the galaxy in their own Millennium Falcon? I know I do. And even as an adult, sometimes I dream about what it would be like to meet a real, actual alien in the flesh. A real, actual alien from another civilization somewhere out there in the universe. Now, lots of people have put a lot of thought into what an actual alien species might look like. But unfortunately, the ones we hear from the most are artists trying to sell books or movies rather than intellectuals trying to take a serious stab at what an alien individual or civilization, for that matter, might look like. But as technology continues to make progress at an ever-increasing rate, the prospect of finding extraterrestrial life in our universe, if it exists, is starting to seem more and more possible. When Star Wars hit the scene, we were still speculating about whether or not planets existed around other stars. Today, we've discovered literally thousands of them. Many in the scientific community are starting to believe that it's only a matter of time before we're finally able to prove we are not alone, and many more expect that day coming sooner rather than later. But unlike Star Wars movies, alien life is likely to be far different from what anyone actually expected or imagined in science fiction. Today, on Applied Scientifica, we'll take an in-depth look at the kinds of things we may in fact discover and what life may actually look like when and if we do. First, a little perspective. Before we can think about the kinds of life we might encounter, we need to decide whether or not it's likely that we're going to encounter life at all. In fact, the question, are we alone, is one of the oldest in astronomy. Many important people have asked this question in the past, including Enrico Fermi, a physicist who famously asked, where are they? That question today, known as the Fermi paradox, refers to the obvious mystery that sort of exists when one ponders the fact that there are so many stars. It stands to reason that life would exist all around us, and yet we have been unable to detect any sign of life beyond our planet to date. Then there's the rare Earth hypothesis, which essentially speculates that the conditions necessary for life to spontaneously begin are so incredibly rare that the Earth may actually be alone in the universe, even with countless other empty worlds where it could, in theory, spring into existence. Personally, I choose to believe that life out there does exist. If it can happen once, it can happen more than once. And relatively speaking, it didn't take that long. If the rare Earth hypothesis was true, it would seem unlikely to me that life would develop so quickly. The universe is 14 billion years old, and 14 billion years seems like an eternity, but it's really only a tiny fraction of the time our universe will exist before the last stars burn out and the last black holes evaporate into nothingness. Let me put that another way. Our sun is estimated to be 4.5 billion years old, and it orbits the Milky Way once every 225 million years. That would make the sun just over 17 galactic years old. Let that sink in for a minute, just 17. I mean, it couldn't even vote in a galactic election at that point. And the universe itself would be about 62. But in these solar galactic years, the universe is still considered a baby. Basically, it's brand new. In other words, when you consider how long the universe is likely to exist, 14 billion years is basically nothing. That's just 1.5 times the lifespan of our sun. So if the rare Earth hypothesis was true, it seems highly improbable that life would have developed so quickly. While life has existed on Earth for billions of years, industrialized, intelligent life has only existed for the last few thousand and is already in danger of exterminating itself via any number of threats. This has interesting ramifications when considering whether or not we will ever discover extraterrestrial life. In other words, intelligent life may in fact exist all around us, but if it dies quickly through war, resource consumption, disease, or even a big rock colliding with it from outer space, rather than being surrounded by a galactic community of thriving planets rich with alien life, we may be surrounded by a vast alien graveyard of ancient societies on dead planets that once had bustling communities, culture, communications, even interstellar travel for all we know, and we would never know anything about it. In fact, there could have been intelligent life with equivalencies to cars, the internet, and the arts right next door on Mars that died out maybe a couple of billion years ago, and we'd never know it was there. And that could be going on all around us. So not only do we have to ask ourselves, where is alien life, but also when was alien life? Life could be anywhere, but to coin a phrase, it could also be any when. By the same token, perhaps life will one day exist on the next star over, but if it takes 17 billion years to evolve, what good does it do us? We'll be long gone and our star will be long dead by then. But let's brush all that aside and simply make the assumption that life exists in the cosmos and it's all around us right now. What might that life look like? Well, in order to answer that question, we're going to have to climb really deep down into the rabbit hole. First, we need to take a look at our own society and something artificial intelligence scientists refer to as the technological singularity, or just the singularity. The singularity is the point in time where we puny humans finally develop a computer that's basically smarter than we are. And it can make itself smarter without our help. In other words, it can make itself smarter and smarter, far surpassing the ability for any human to comprehend. Such a computer would, in theory, quickly become a super intelligent being with godlike intellectual powers. So why is that important? Well, first, if other planetary societies are anything like humans, they're going to reach the technological singularity long before they ever develop propulsion necessary for interstellar space travel. To put that another way, before a civilization is ever capable of launching a ship that would reach Earth, it will have already reached the point where its computers were smarter than the beings who built them. Now, probably most of you are thinking about the Terminator series right now with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you'll remember that when they reached the singularity, it didn't work out so well for humans. If you think this is some wacko, weird idea, keep in mind that many of today's leading tech and scientific voices are not laughing. Elon Musk recently warned of an immortal dictator, and Bill Gates compared the threat of artificial intelligence to that of nuclear weapons. Similarly, Stephen Hawking, before he died, warned that AI has the potential to destroy civilization and could be the worst thing that has ever happened to humanity. So in order for intelligent life to persist, we will need to believe that it somehow is able to survive and peacefully coexist with the rise of artificial intelligence. This is something we have yet to face on Earth, but it's coming our way. Maybe even before we figure out where intelligent life exists in the cosmos, maybe while we're still alone. Some estimates have us reaching the singularity point as early as the year 2040. So once again, we're going to have to make another assumption and accept that we aren't exterminated by the machines in order to have a shot at joining the galactic community of inhabited planets, if such a thing exists. The next thing we need to consider when we think about extraterrestrial life is how far away we are from the other stars. This is important because we want to know whether or not we're ever going to meet aliens face to face, or if we're ever going to just be able to communicate with them over some kind of galactic radio frequency. The nearest star to Earth is 4.5 years away, traveling at the speed of light. And there are only around 150 stars of various types within 50 light years. Now, I chose 50 because a round-trip message would take 100 years, and anything longer than that would mean that any communication between our planet and an external species would basically guarantee that the person who sent the message would be dead by the time the answer returned. Since nothing can go faster than light, unless we discover new laws of physics, humans will probably never leave the solar system. In other words, we're stuck here. Traveling at 40,000 miles per hour, which is about the pace of Voyager 1, one of 2 ships to have ever left our solar system, it would take about 60,000 years to reach the nearest star, far too long for humans to consider practical. This leaves us with 2 possibilities for interacting with aliens. Either finding them very, very close, which is incredibly unlikely given the number of stars there are nearby, or the only aliens that our planet will ever interact with will be post-singularity artificial intelligence. In other words, we'll be talking to their computers. Why? Because we're not going to be able to go out and meet them, and the only way they could come here to meet us is if they have the ability to live for tens of thousands of years, or if they send a computer. With all the perils and technology challenges that exist, is it still possible that there could be intergalactic community waiting for us to reveal ourselves? Possibly. but it might look very different than what we expect. Humans have a tiny relative lifespan of just 80 years, but machines have no such limitations. They live on a different timescale. If there's a large galactic community out there, it might make sense to consider the possibility that organic life forms aren't part of the equation anymore. In other words, it might take dozens or even hundreds of years for return signals between intelligent civilizations, but artificial intelligence isn't likely to be impatient like a human would be. It could simply wait for an answer. In theory, communication between two or more AI civilizations could span hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years because the time scale of an artificial intelligence is close to limitless. Imagine for a moment a great community of remote civilizations throughout the galaxy or even the universe, where each with its own homegrown artificial intelligence that originally evolved from organic life like us. Imagine that they all communicate with each other by radio signals at the speed of light, the same way humans communicate with each other by telephone. Such a network of communication would be incredibly slow by human standards because of the great distances involved, but computers don't operate on the same timescale as humans. A normal human conversation that takes 5 minutes could take 5,000 years between two remote civilizations, but artificial intelligence would simply be able to wait. In such a scenario, humans and other biological life forms would be uninvolved in the transaction. After all, why would a post-singularity artificial intelligence attempt to communicate with someone that wasn't going to be alive long enough to receive a response? So, barring the discovery of new laws of physics that allow us to communicate or travel faster than light, there's a chance that the only civilizations out there in contact with each other are AI, and so advanced that they would likely be communicating in ways too complex for organic life forms like us to detect, much less comprehend. In other words, what would a human have to say to a godlike alien intelligent computer? And why would it care? In truth, there are a million questions one could ask before ever getting this far into a theoretical conversation about interstellar artificial intelligence. For instance, while humans desire wealth, power, and love, what would an artificial intelligence that had godlike capability care about enough to seek out other forms of life? Perhaps we'll discuss that in a future episode of Applied Scientifica.